Hello everyone, welcome back to the Good, the Bad, the Ugly podcast. Now I've got a cough. Oh gosh, there we go. Yeah, today we have, once again, the Acting Deputy Commissioner, Mr. Stephen House. I'm going to give you a clap myself. We've also got guests, as you can hear. This is the first time for everything. First, I want to say I really appreciate you coming, sir.
Pleasure.
Giving up your time, once again, coming to speak to the community. We love it.
It's important. So.
Yeah. Today, I'm not going to waste any time because I know time is precious once again. What we're going to do is we're going to go to questions that have been sent in by us. First, it's going to be Elliot. So,
Firstly, thank you for having us all.
Pleasure.
I was just going to ask, with the amount of police time and money being spent on the war on drugs and like the attitudes towards it, is it time we start reevaluating our attitudes towards punishments, not only to users but also dealers?
yeah. Okay.
So I think it's a question the Mayor's very interested in at the moment. I've got to give you a fairly sort of narrow answer. You know, the police don't set the laws; we enforce them. And if Parliament decides to change the legislation on drugs, then that's what we will enforce. At the moment, as you know, the legislation is where it is. I think it's important to say, though, that as far as I think in general policing, but certainly the Met is concerned, our focus is on drug dealers, not drug users. So we're not particularly interested in prosecuting to the nth degree and taking through the criminal justice system people who are using drugs or are in possession of drugs for their own personal usage. That, for me, is a health... let me be clear on it. My view is, and it's probably an old-fashioned one, I think they're illegal for a good reason. I think it's a health reason. I'm increasingly worried by the links that appear to be growing between excessive use of very strong cannabis and mental conditions later in life. So I worry about that for society. But when it comes to dealers, the Met is very different, and most police forces will be the same, which is we'll try and prosecute them as far as we possibly can and get them locked up. War on drugs is not a phrase we use much anymore because actually this is more about education and health than anything else. And when we see successes, it's because people are using less drugs and there's less business for the dealers. All the while people are using, the dealers will be there because it's all about money. We focus on dealing with the people that are supplying drugs, killing people effectively. And you see huge drugs deaths across England and Wales and Scotland every year. Of course, there are other ways of dealing with all of it, but that is a matter for the government, not for us. We will focus on drug dealers, and where it's an antisocial thing in the street of people openly smoking drugs, using drugs, and it's upsetting the bulk of the population, we'll respond to that as well.
Elliot?
No, that was very fair.
Next question, Michael.
Good morning.
Morning.
I just wanted to know, what current measures are being put in place to sort of increase black recruitment within the Met, and I guess also important retention once they're already in.
Well, Michael, it's a good question. My answer is how long have you got in many respects? But I mean, I could point to the bloke at the back of the room, who's one of our chief superintendents, who's leading a lot of this work. But I'm going to speak, and if
Sorry, that's Mr. Booth.
yeah, Jeff Booth leads on a lot of our outreach into London's communities. It's a very high priority for us to try to be more reflective of the population of London, and we're not at the moment. But some of the figures are getting better slowly. So just bear with me. Population of London, because the census is out now, the new census is out. Population of London is still, I think, 51% women. The Met is currently recruiting around about 39, nearly 40% of our new recruits are women. So we're getting there with new recruits. In terms of people in the organisation, it's only about 30% women so far, but we're improving on that. Now, okay, you asked about blacks, I'm talking about women. Diversity is diversity, and we need to focus on all aspects of diversity. When it comes to minority groups, we are around about one in 4 new recruits is from an Asian or a black community, which is far better than it was. That masks the problem, though, which I'll get to, and I won't deny, which is, although we're about 25% of new recruits being black or Asian, when you look at black communities, it's about 5%. Now, for London, it should be around about 12 to 15% in terms of the reps. So we are way down. Why? Because historically, traditionally, the Met has had problems with black communities. Much of our making. It takes two sides, but a lot of the stuff that we've done and got wrong in the past quite clearly influences people. I've gone on record in front of a Home Affairs Select Committee saying, if you're a black person in London and you join the Metropolitan Police, you're making a brave decision. It's a brave thing to do because there's so much publicity out there about what a racist organisation will, how badly you're going to be treated. And I'm not saying that some black officers don't have those experiences. Many do not. Is it a safe place for black officers? We're trying to make it as safe as possible. I believe it is increasingly so. We're putting an awful lot of effort into it. So we have around about 50 officers, Jeff, in our outreach scheme?
A total of over 65 staff.
There you go. So how out of touch am I? So 65 people dedicated to outreach work, to go out into communities that don't normally think about joining the Met and say to them, have a think about this. And that's a very, very diverse 65 members of staff. And the feedback we're getting is, even when they speak to communities and they don't want to join, and most people don't want to join the police. Most people don't want to join the police. It's not sort of everybody's cup of tea. But the people they do speak to say, no, thanks, I'm not interested, but it's good to see that you are at least in this community and you are asking are we interested in joining? We are seeing an increase. It's slower than I want. Why? Well, because there's so much publicity around about what a bad organisation we are in terms of our race attitudes, and we'll have questions in a minute about stop and search, I'm sure.
So can I ask you a question?
Yeah, of course. That's him saying I'm talking too much. Go on.
Yeah. A little bit, yeah. No, I was going to ask if is there anything put in place for the next commissioner? Because I know it's not going to be you, but the future. That's a big worry because people have asked me that the future commissioner are they going to be going along the same lines as you? Because I say you're doing good work because you let me do this, so I'm happy.
Yeah.
So
your empire's growing. Yeah. It's hard. It's a difficult question for me to answer, to be honest. I mean, I know them both a little. I know one very well. There's two candidates. I know one very well. I know the other one not so well. They will be focused on diversity issues. They will be focused on community issues. They'll be focused on the lack of trust and confidence. They must be, because it's our biggest issue. Yeah. It is our biggest issue. So they will be focused on that, and I'm quite certain that the Home Secretary and the Mayor and the Policing Minister will be asking them lots of questions to make sure that's where their focus is. Whether they'll follow through on everything that, not that I launched, but that the previous Commissioner Cressida launched, because she was completely committed to this. Yeah. Despite what people might think outside this organisation, she was completely committed to this. I think they'll follow through on most of what she's saying, but they'll change some things. Yeah. You asked about retention as well. Retention's really important. There's no point in us bringing in lots of black candidates, and after 6 months they think, sod this for a game of soldiers, I'm off. I'm not enjoying this very much. So we are working on that. So new recruits get buddies to try and help them through the process. We put in extra support for them. Are we good enough at doing that? No, we're not. We're a huge organisation, and we can at times be a bit faceless. And we put extra senior officers in posts on all of our local police stations to look out for, particularly officers from ethnic minorities, to make sure that they are not experiencing problems. Because often, it could be English as a first language. It could be that English is your first language, but mum and dad isn't. Therefore, your idioms are not the same. Paperwork could be a problem.
Do you know what I think an issue is with that? When it gets sent out on the aware system, and I think my colleagues will agree, it's met with skepticism. I'm like, wait a second, someone's asking me, first of all, am I black? And as being a black officer, do I want this buddy? It just feels so strange. Right. So I think the organisation just needs to market it better. That's all it is, really. Okay. It's just marketing.
Jeff and I can take that away. I mean, it comes from a good place. Yeah. It might be clumsy. I do get that.
It's not that it's clumsy. It's because it's so new. Yeah. People are like, wait, this must be wrong. It feels like, I'm scared. So that's probably that was my. I got an email and I was like, gosh, no.
All change is not wrong though, Dom, is it?
No.
Sometimes change is a good thing, and it comes from the right place. I've actually had a lot of feedback personally on email from people who are buddies saying they think it's working really well.
I'm not saying it's not working. I'm saying that it's just the way it initially got delivered. It scared people. Okay. That's all it was. It's not to stop it. I think it should go forward. I think, but it was just the way it was delivered. Okay. And I think it's something that I could probably push so people would be less worried about it. But
we'll do that then.
Yeah. Next question. We'll go to Gabriel.
Good morning.
Morning.
How are you?
I'm good, thank
Good.
you. Well, apart from my cough, I'm all right.
Yeah. Okay. Just to go back to the question which this gentleman asked, so then I'll go back to my question.
Right.
Okay, so I think you sort of mentioned that there are some stigmas in regards to racism in the police force.
Of course.
Okay, and I think you alluded to the fact that, not saying that you agreed that it exists, but I think you alluded to the fact that you have acknowledged that it might exist, which are two different things.
What, racism in the police?
Yeah.
Of course it exists, yeah.
So you would agree that it does exist?
Of course.
Okay.
We have racist police officers, and some of our processes and practices aren't sufficiently. He just raised one.
Mm.
Put our buddying scheme. We thought it was a good idea. If we didn't word it right, it might put some people off, and some people might think, well, that's not right. Well, that's just clumsiness. But of course there are problems in the police service. I don't think you'll find many senior police officers, in fact many police officers who won't acknowledge, of course there are. We're made up from society. So there's bound to be problems. Are we trying to fix them? Yeah, we are.
Okay, now, and I think you mentioned something, I think it was mentioned in the fact that we find that there's a misrepresentation when it comes to black police officers in the force. And I think he was explaining the relationship that there is with the black community and the police force.
Yeah.
As to maybe why that might be the reason.
Mm-hmm.
Now going to my question, because it links into it. So according to the Gov website, in England and Wales between April 2020 and March 2021, there were just under 700,000 stop and searches in England and Wales. Now there were 7.5 stop and searches for every 1,000 white people, compared to 52.6 for every 1,000 black person.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we make, and I say we as in the black community, tend to make around 3% of the population in the UK. I think
12%
it's
in
around,
London.
yeah, between 11 and 12%. We have plus minus in London.
Yeah.
Okay. When you look at those numbers and then you sort of say to yourself, how, and I can only focus on me, and say, how can someone in my community, when looking at 1,000, it's 52.6, where we only make up 3%. Mate, let's talk 12% in London, compared to 7.5. To say it's by chance and just by, luck of the draw.
It's not, James.
It's not.
No.
And when we talk about trying to get more police officers into the force, because I think representation is key in everything in life.
Yeah.
I run businesses, and a lot of people run businesses off the back of me running them because they can see that I can do it.
Yeah.
It's not rocket science.
Yeah.
So I say to myself, what? And I know, as you mentioned, a lot of stuff is legislation and to do with Parliament, not to do with the police force itself, because you're just enforcing the law. Okay, but at the same time, and then this isn't an attack at you. It's a direct question saying, what is being done to stop this happening? Okay, and why are black people being disproportionately targeted by the police?
Okay. Right, that's a really good question. So you talk. I have to come back a bit with figures, but then I'll get away from the figures. So you're talking about a figure of basically 7.1 times more likely to be stopped in England and Wales if you're a black man, I think it is, than a white man. In London, that figure isn't 7%; it's 3.1%. So we need to stick with the figure for the Met. I lead the Met. I'm talking about the Met. It's not 7 times. It's 3 times more likely. Now that's still why? Why am I? I'll give you another figure, and that is again between 7 and 9 times. If you're a young black man, you're 7 to 9 times more likely to be murdered in London than if you're a white man.
Okay.
And you are around about the same proportion more likely to be involved as a murderer. So I met yesterday with a group of very positive black women doctors who were very concerned about some of the things that we were doing. It's a very constructive meeting. They openly said to me, and quite happily said, and not happily, but acknowledged, there is a problem with violence in young black communities in London. It's an issue. And it is an issue, there's no doubt about it. Statistically, black communities, young black men are more likely to be involved in violent crime than their white counterparts. And they live in more violent parts of London, and they live in poorer parts of London, and the two are quite clearly linked in some way, shape or form. And they are more likely to be excluded from school at an early age than their white counterparts, and they're more likely to be involved in the criminal justice system. There is multiple disadvantage on the black communities in London. There is no doubt about that. If you are a black mother, you are 4 times more likely to die in childbirth than if you're a white mother. These are all statistics that are not our statistics. They're nationally developed statistics by Home Office, by NHS. We focus. Somebody said to me once, "Why don't when you do stop and search? Why do you do it unfairly? Why do you target?" If we didn't target stop and search, we would stop 51 women out of every 100 people we stopped. Why would we do that? Women in general don't carry weapons. We would stop something like 17 or 18 people over the age of 65 for every 100 people we stopped.
So it sounds like you're saying the reason why this is happening, or this occurs, where it's 3 times more likely to stick to London, because you're saying that the reason why that may be happening is because you're saying that young black males are committing a lot more crime than they should, so therefore they're being stop and search more than everybody else.
More violent crime, yes. So we're targeting. So you're quite right to say we do target. Yes, of course we do. Because if we didn't target our stop and search, we'd just be out there randomly stopping people, which would be ludicrous. So we're targeted on areas of high violence.
When a stop and search is being done, curiosity. I know it's a very ambiguous question.
Last one, please.
Yeah, it's a very ambiguous question. But what exactly is being looked for? Because it's fine to say, okay, we're stopping searching someone because black people commit more crime.
Yeah.
But I always use the analogy of, if I chat up 75 women and Dom chats up 2, I'm likely to get more numbers than Dom because I've chatted up 75 women and he's chatted up 2. So my question is because it makes it out to say that because black people are committing more crime, this is why they're being stopped and searched. But surely, obviously there needs to be, technically it doesn't need to be a suspicion.
Yeah.
My question is,
what
Do you want me to answer this?
Yeah.
Because I'll answer simply because the boss doesn't go out and do stop and search.
Yeah.
We've got officers here today. We're not going to show them, but they do stop and searches all the time. I was on that team, the gangs unit. We target it based on the information we get. So we have we check all the indices. So we have databases which tell us stuff that's going on. Someone will report a crime, say that there's drug dealers, whatever. And then we'll go flood that area and we'll see what's actually going on. So and we don't discriminate. So if a white man shows up and he's in the area that in the area that it was reported, he may get stopped and searched more than likely. It's got nothing to do with the colour, especially the team in this area, the Westminster Gangs Unit. It doesn't matter what colour you are. We've had women, boys, girls, everything. Old men, everything. Suits, tracksuit bombs, across the board. So does that happen across the Met? Probably not. I don't think so. But that's how it should be. That's what we should be aiming for. Because what does happen, I would agree with you, Gabriel, is that some people their view is based solely upon maybe social media and not necessarily always the direct information from like the person informing. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yes. I don't want to take up too much time because he's only got half an hour.
Now I want to answer your question.
Yes or no, because I said I've never been arrested, never been involved in anything.
All right. To be fair,
all of my youth growing up, I got stopped and searched on pulled in cars, and I've never, and even up to now, I still have PTSD to the point that I'll have a baseball cap on my head. I'm a businessman. I find myself almost taking my cap off.
I'm sorry you feel that way.
And it's nothing to do with you or anyone in here. But as I said,
but it's my organisation. I'm sorry we make you feel that way, but I genuinely believe officers are doing this for the. Of course, there'll be 1 or 2 officers out there who've got unconscious racial bias, or possibly even conscious racial bias. The vast majority do not. They're just trying to catch weapons. We seize 400 weapons a month, every month, through stop and search. If anyone in this room can tell me how we can get those 400 weapons off people who may well use them to kill somebody, without doing stop and search, I'd love to do it, because at the moment there's no sign. The idea is we can develop some sort of scientific scanner you can put on the side of the road and it will beep when someone goes past.
I've got nothing on stop and search.
I'm going to stop it there. I'm going to stop it.
Just add that.
No, I'm going to jump in there.
It's just got to be done. It's just got
questions.
But honestly, I can jump back in because I'm who I am.
I like his taking authority, I like it.
I know, right? I just got flexed on big time.
It's got to be done professionally and properly. No one enjoys being stopped and searched. Why would you? It's oppressive, it's intrusive, and it can be very demeaning. We should do it, and we've got a reasonable suspicion that something is happening or somebody is carrying something. It's done for the right reason. It's not always done in the right way, but it should be done in the right way.
Gabriel, thank you. Great question, sir. Thank you. Flexing on me as well. That was mildly embarrassing. We're going to go to Nick.
You know what? I saw Gabriel peeping at my phone. I seen you were copying my question. But it kind of feeds into the same type of thing. So I'll just feed into the next couple of questions that I got. So
can we keep it to one? Is that
no,
right? We want to get to everyone.
It ties into the same
Okay,
thing.
go on. Go for it.
So
Sorry.
direct question is, unconscious biases, everybody has them. I want to know what type of training programs the police officers here go through, and what are the consequences when they breach them? How do you guys find out when something's been breached? I'm saying it's nice of y'all to say, this is exactly how you look, but I mean, there needs to be some transparency from a community standpoint for me to know this is the kind of training that the police officers are going through. So, I mean, these e-learning programs, how often are these things being done? And then how are you keeping the officers accountable? When the officers go out and do stop and searches, I mean, who's watching? I mean, who knows? How do I know if these guys are going through the processes? If something goes wrong, who's having the conversation?
I've got your question, and for time, So every new recruit goes through a phenomenal amount of training in relation to why they're exercising their powers and to do it in a proper way. We are also rolling out training for all of our existing officers on unconscious bias. There's lots of material out there. I'd have to get back to you through Don to give you the exact detail of what it is, but there is an awful lot of training out there for officers. They know what the law is. They know that except for one special area of stop and search, your average stop and search, they need to have a reasonable cause for doing that stop and search. And they need to be able to explain that to a court of law going forward. And if they can't explain it, then they're in trouble. And when you talk about, what accountability is there? My predecessor was famous for often saying, we are the most accountable public service in the world. And I believe we are. So these officers who do stop and search, every officer who does stop and search, their supervisors, their sergeants will dip sample their body-worn video. They have to do that on a regular basis every month.
Each one, every single one.
They have to do it on a monthly basis to look at what stop and searches are you doing, are you carrying them out properly, is there learning there? If there is a problem and it's not a breach of the law, then they'll just get some words of advice. If there's an issue, a bigger issue, then they'll be referred to our professional standards unit and they'll be investigated. And ultimately it will go into the independent office of public conduct, police conduct, to see whether or not there is a breach of police regulations or indeed a criminal breach. And we have part of the reason that we have public trust and confidence issue, particularly amongst black communities, is because there is so much publicity about when officers are thought to have breached and the IOPC are looking at it. So we've got cases going back 2 and 3 years of very high profile people, I'll not name them, very high profile people who were stopped and who have complained about that, and it's been looked at by an independent body. Officers are, if you ask any police officer, do you feel scrutinised over stop and search? They will tell you that they do, and I have to tell you that a number feel so scrutinised they're not doing stop and search anymore, and we're seeing the number of stop and searches reduce because officers are scared of the consequences of getting it wrong. Because when you do a stop and search, it's not a case of you and the individual doing it. If you're doing it in certain parts of London, most parts of London now, you will get surrounded by groups of people who will all have their mobile phones on there, and they will be taunting the officer, they will be abusing the officer, they will be trying to get in their way. Even when a knife is found, we've got video footage of when knives are found on people that are stopped and searched, the crowd is still very aggressive about it, gets in the way of the officers. Now, I'm not saying that all of our officers get stop and search right all the time, they don't. Sometimes they get it wrong, sometimes they're badly trained, badly motivated, and they just make mistakes. Sometimes, frankly, they're scared or their adrenaline's up and they make mistakes. You know this better than I do.
Yeah, I
agree. I mean, if you think cops go out and do stop and search and it's not shaky hands time, you're nuts. Yeah. It is scary when they're doing stop and search. They're doing it to get weapons off the street. It's when they're doing it.
Nick, is that good?
I don't know if I got more time.
You got more time, but let me go to Wayne first, and if we've got time, we'll come back. We've only got like 5 minutes left. Wayne, you can stand up if you want. You can stand up if you want. You can stand up if you want.
Do I have to?
Project your voice down. It's up to you. It's just you're at the back.
I'd rather stand up there.
No, back.
As an ex-head and a historian, I'd just like to say that evidence shows that mindsets and views can be changed depending on the information given. So should recruits be given more teaching specifically to change their perception of certain ethnic groups.
Really good point, and I do believe we are doing more. And honestly, as a ex-head, I'd invite you to go to Hendon, to go to.
I've been there actually. I went with Jeffrey Deere many moons ago.
That was a long time ago.
It was, yeah. I do remember that. And it was interesting because as a black person walking in, the looks.
Yeah.
It was like, who's he? Why is he
Get
here?
those looks now.
Are you sure?
I can guarantee you. Yeah, I can absolutely guarantee you won't.
The reason sorry guys, can I ask you a question? I know it's
I'm not
you.
sure that they're here.
Who is Mansa Musa?
I can tell you Mansa Musa.
I know you can.
Dom, you can't answer.
Yes, expand a little bit more. Right. See, the reason I asked the question is I think lots of young recruits don't have the knowledge because they think black people came here on the Windrush, not realising we were here in Tudor England and the Roman times.
Yeah.
Also, the concept
of
race is a social construct. Blumenbach et al., etc. I don't want to go and bore you with all the details, but I think it's important that to erase some of the immediate perceptions, people have to be, especially in such a highly charged job that you're doing, in my opinion, very well. However, I do believe there's scope for more training.
We are agreeing furiously. So there will always be scope for more training, but our
specific training.
Yeah. So I'm talking particularly about our new recruits, and I'm conscious I am. When they go into training, they get big inputs on stop and search. We do reverse stop and search. We bring in members of the black community to do stop and search with the officers, so they get to understand what that feels like. When our new officers go on to the police stations where they're going to work, they get inputs from local communities about community history and community tensions, so that they understand why some of the attitudes might be there. Yeah, I think you're probably right. There is a perception that Windrush was the first black person arrived in Britain on Windrush, etc., etc. And we know that's absolute nonsense.
But you may do, but I'm sure that the majority of your recruits don't know.
The majority of the public don't either.
Hence, educate them both black and white.
There's probably a bigger issue there around Black History Month, etc., which we take a full part in every year when it comes around. I'm very happy if you come back to Hendon now. I guarantee you won't get. The only way you'll get looks is because you're quite tall. That's probably about it. If you come back now, you will not get any strange looks. And I'd like you come and see what we're doing.
I will.
Well, you can come with me. We'll go together.
Sorry?
We can go Hendon together.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
We're going to wrap up now.
Okay.
But thank you for the questions. I've got one last question that was sent to me by someone that couldn't be here.
This is the killer question.
Sean Pascal. I'll be honest, I haven't read this. Me has checked it.
The Columbo question. Oh, before you go,
I did it to you last time, didn't I?
You did, yeah.
I did, yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm not sorry. There seems to be a lack of transparency in the investigations of police officers, as well as poor paper trails, which is undermining confidence in the Met ability to conduct internal investigations without bias or prejudice.
Okay.
What steps have or can be made to remedy these issues?
Okay.
And would it not be prudent to work more closely with the CPS, ensuring that thresholds are met when investigating complaints? Gosh, there wasn't enough comments in there.
That feels like it's an interesting question.
It was a police officer though.
Yeah, it's an interesting question because in terms of transparency, when something hits the Independent Office of Police Conduct notice, and we're mandated to refer some to them, and we voluntarily refer a number of complaints to them, then we lose transparency because we don't see what's going on.
Okay.
But and it can take a long time to do it. But we should have confidence that there is an independent body that does this, that holds us to account. I also believe that our own Department of Professional Standards are doing a good job in holding our officers to account, and our officers often feel very under pressure and resentful for that. Could we make it more transparent? I guess we could, but a number of hearings are now held in public, so that the public can see justice underway and being done.
Well, we'll end on that note.
Okay.
Really appreciate you coming today. We're going to have to do this again. Hopefully
not next week though.
Not next week. But you choose the time. You choose the time. Don't choose the time.
Well, I'm not leaving yet, so please don't put that rumour around.
Good stuff. That's what I like to hear. I want you to stay.
Because my wife will be listening and she won't be impressed. Okay, Dom, thanks ever so much. I'm sorry we didn't get to everybody to answer the questions. I do apologise, but I talk too much, and if I may say so, some of the questions were long. So
I'm sure you'll let us do it again, wouldn't you?
I'd be happy to do it.
It's on
I'd be
camera
happy
now,
to
there we
do it again at some point.
Right, thanks.